Yo soy Diego Mas Trelles.
My name is Diego Mas Trelles. I'm the co-director of the festival Women Film, Madrid Films Made by Women. Welcome to you all to the Espacio Fundación Telefónica for those who are here present, and welcome to all of those who are also seeing this in streaming. I will introduce the speakers that we have in our panel today. They will introduce themselves later, but I would like to welcome them all here. First of all, Esther Bannenberg. She has worked in sales agencies, in the production area, and funds for film making. She's also related to the Rotterdam Festival. She is an expert in several areas in the audiovisual field. She is part of the delegation of their focus in the Netherlands, which is the country that we have as a guest in the festival this year. We also have Margje Koning. She is an ex-commissioning editor of the Icon channel, of a channel for documentaries based in the Netherlands. She usually moderates several fora, such as the Elitha, which is the most important forum when it comes to documentaries, for sure in Europe and probably in the world. She is also here as the director of a festival that is held in Amsterdam that is called Movies That Matter, and she will elaborate on this later on. I would also like to welcome Patrizia Rappazzo. She directs the festival Sguardi Altrove in Milan. Sguardi Altrove, sorry. It hosts some movies produced by women, and also some movies that are directed by men but related to the situation of women, or these are stories of women. And to my right, I have Li Jingxiang. She is a director who is from China. Her first movie was presented here in this very festival last year. She represents the Baturu Film Festival. This is a women film festival in China, and we have an agreement of cooperation with this festival. We have 3 Chinese movies in our Cineteca area space, and they have had 6 Spanish directors' films that went around China, Shanghai, Beijing, etc. And she lives in Paris at the moment, and this is why she is going to speak in French, and I will be translating her into Spanish for you. I would like to leave the floor to Margje Koning. She is going to introduce Movies That Matter.
I'll speak in English. Movies That Matter is a film festival which was once founded by Amnesty International. And why? What they found out that if you want to communicate to a lot of people, you can tell stories, you write articles, but film is an amazing tool to come across stories which in their case was always about human rights. That's how it was founded nearly 20 years ago. Then it evolved into Movies That Matter 15 years ago, and it's a human rights film festival focused on, as of course, human rights, social issues, and now also environmental issues. I have to do a little correction. It's not in Amsterdam, but it's in The Hague, and the reason why the film festival is based in The Hague, because that's officially called the City of Peace and Law, and the ICC, the International Criminal Court, is based there, and our government. So what Movies That Matter does, and I will have a little presentation in a second, we bring in a lot of politicians, decision makers, and that's very easy. People from the ICC, high-end lawyers, judges, and so come to speak at the festival. So we have a film, and then we have an in-depth program in order to talk about these films. Is it all about women? Human rights is not all about women, but it's a lot about women. So you'll see some men, and I'm happy to see quite a lot of men in the room. So it's not only on women, but there's nearly no film they're not involved in one way or another. So this is Movies That Matter. I just I now find it really embarrassing. This is me. And I just wanted to point out that I've been a filmmaker myself for nearly 14 years, making only films on lots of women issues, social issues. So I know the other side of filmmaking, commissioning editor. And just to give you a flavor what kind of festival we are, I'd like to show you the trailer from last year. It's only a minute, but you've got a feeling of what kind of films we're showing. Could you please play the trailer? So, I'll go to the next slide. Oh, how do that? Can I go to the next slide? Yeah. This is when our festival is taking place. We've got an impact program, and we don't pitch, as you said, that I moderated the forum, and people pitch their films. At Movies That Matter, you pitch your impact plans. So, like film as the starting point of a long, long history, hopefully, to engage people in the film you're trying to make or you want to make. And a lot of filmmakers, I don't know how many. Are there filmmakers in the room? Yeah, okay, cool. You're busy with your film, but then you work so hard on your film, and then it would be great that the film travels not only to festivals and broadcasters and so on, but also in society, and we try to become a platform in order to do so. So people pitch their impact plans. We've got 4 pillars very quickly. The festival is obviously the big one. International, talk a bit about that later. Educational program is for us really, really big. We reach nearly 200,000 pupils per year, and we tour around the Netherlands and do events. Just to give you a few. There we have competition activists, and in activists, interestingly enough, this was last year. We've got a lot of women, as you can see, a film, I'll just pick one out, Writing with Fire, about the women journalists in India, trying to find their voice in the local newspaper, which was very, very harsh as a woman to be a journalist. Women of Valor, set in Israel at the connection where the women try to get a political say, at least, for instance. On these grounds, I think on these grounds, a very, very strong film set in America, where a woman started as an activist due to the fact that girls have been beaten up by police in a secondary school. She went there and she made a statement saying, every black girl, and made a whole movement on that. She was, for instance, again now in the Netherlands. We interviewed her, and with her we went to the Dutch embassy, to embassies, to different places in the Netherlands, and she does that in the States. So that's one of the really, really power ladies, for instance, and it's nice to show. That's the activist competition. Then we have Camera Justitia for the minute. No, I'm joking. Navalny was our opening film. There's always a law case in there. That's Camera Justitia, Myanmar Diaries. Oh, I should go back one. Myanmar Diaries, very important. I don't know. Has anybody seen Myanmar Diaries? About the anonymous filmmakers, women, men filmmakers, anonymously made documentaries in Myanmar and smuggled it out of the country. And a Dutch producer, she put it all together, and it's now going up for the Oscar. So, I mean, these films can be really, really important. The Dutch competitions, this is a very beautiful story. Is it human rights? I'm not so sure. Is it important talking about taboos? I think it's very important. This is a woman who is physically very handicapped, and she, above being 50 years old, she's trying to understand and discover her own sexuality. And it's made by a very strong women filmmaker. So I think these kind of films are also very important and should be in human rights festivals, as we do it anyways. Then Huda Salon is just an example of a very, very strong film, a Palestinian filmmaker on her journey. Check it out, otherwise it's taking too long. We've got grand jury fiction, documentary, and shorts. And then as you can see, and we did quite on purpose, we used to have like fantastic, one of these focus was really on women, and we felt like that is also sort of, I think it's really good you're doing this, but it felt like too maybe patronizing. So you see women documentaries actually in Take on Afghanistan, Sarah Mani, 1,000 Girls Like Me, Take on Future, there is Take on Love, Take on Power, Take on Voices. There is all women voices actually through the whole program. So it's not one section, because they're very powerful women. They're women talking about love, about future, and on Voices for surely the Indian film of the filmmaker. What else do we do? This is educational. This is what we do. As you can see, we try to reach as many students as possible. Of course, film is an amazing tool for that. We give now. This is events and advice we do, and then which I would like to point out to you is that we do international support. So Movies That Matter, not like, for instance, ITVA or IFFR giving grants to films, but we give grants to film festivals who are under pressure and not able to get their finances in their own countries, due to the fact that it's not allowed to have an LGBT+, a women festival. Other festivals, Gaza is one, West Sahara is one, in the Philippines is a strong one, Ukraine, of course, also in Russia, the LGBTQ+ would not have any finance and would not be able to have a festival. So we do this together with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we grant film festivals all over the world, and it could be women issues, but this as well could be other issues which should be addressed, and otherwise the films would not be shown. So as you can see, that's in many countries, and we have a huge film network, and now it's already extended to nearly 50 human rights film festivals all over the world. And if you're interested, go to the website, because it's I think it's personally mind-blowing to see. Like, you have the Red Carpet Film Festival in Gaza, because everything is bombed. So they only ask us, can we have a beamer and folding chairs? And they just roll a red carpet, put down the chairs, put down a beamer, and show films in between where everything is bombed. So these are very, very, to me, very impressive ways. And then film is healing. Film is then healing, can be a healing process for the people together. So I think that's very important to show. I try to be fast, huh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always write a statement, because I've been lecturing in my life, and I always like to give a little bit of a message. It doesn't matter how big or small your topic. When you, the filmmaker, believe in the film, make this happen with heart and soul, with craftsmanship, creativity, it will always reach audience and maybe change a few things in this world for the better. And then I always say, it's very good as filmmakers, producers, whatever. I'm so happy, and thank you very much for being here, to meet people, get inspired by other people. So that's always my hardest statement. And of course, when you work for a human rights film festival, you can imagine that you're always searching for not so much the underdog, but people who are really going for a fight to get rights for other people. And that doesn't only mean women, but it's very often, I must say, like 70-80%, it is women's issues. Thank you very much.
Overwhelming.
Una presentación impresionante. Muy buena presentación. Patrizia, Rappazzo is going to tell us about Sguardi Altrove.
Grazie di...
First of all, thank you for the invitation. This is a young festival. It has already has accumulated a great prestige. I've been directing this festival for many years already, and this year we will have the 30th anniversary, and it is a privilege because it is a festival that in Italy it encounters many difficulties in order to keep existing, despite the fact that it is being supported by many public institutions, for instance, the Culture Ministry or the region, the Lombardy, which is the region where this the city that it hosts is located, and by the Town Hall of Milan and many national and international embassies, cooperation by many cultural centers, etc. So the festival has its value in terms of visibility and for the presentation of many movies that have been directed by women and by men, as the co-director of the festival said, because along the years, we have had to work very intently with the audience and to start including the men as movie makers. Has entailed having an audience that has both men and women of all age ranges, young people, elderly people. We are very focused in the youngers. We have specific training for young people so that we can work in the most contemporary topics. We have 9 sections in the festival, 3 of which are competitive, 2 of which are international, both documentaries and movies. We also have fiction movies and documentaries in the same section in order to give the same artistic value to the documentaries. We have an international documentary contest, and also we have an Italian section, an Italian prize that is an audience award, and also by the Film Institution of Italy. For the rest of the sections, we have an international tribunal of people working in the film sector at an international level, and we have different relevant figures at an international level that work in order to deliver our movies. There are many parallel sections. One of them was born a few years ago. It was called Pale Blue, Azzurro Pallido, which is an expression that reflects that these are only films directed by men who were sensitive enough to really portray women from a 360-degree angle, and this would be very similar to the way women work. In this sense, I would like to open a brief parenthesis and to state that over these 16 years of directing the festival, I've been asked if there has ever been an exclusively feminine genre. And I have always said that this is not the case. We're talking rather about sensitivity, about a type of working styles in order to really portray both feminine and masculine characters over time. However, I have had to change this view with time, because the truth is that women have changed the way they work. We have more women directors. Obviously, the average or the numbers are still quite low. I will give you some figures if we have the time. But nowadays, women do not only talk about intimate stories, about family, about love. They can tell any type of stories they can talk about wars, about human rights, about context or social situations. They really cover a whole of the international chronicle, and this is part of the specificity of our film festival. This means that movies read our current history with a social outlook. It's a different way of bringing people closer to an ethical reflection on our current topics. Every year we develop a focus section related to international issues that have become more significant at an international level. For instance, we have this focus area about environment, in particular environmental catastrophes. We are going to take as a reference water, the topic of water, which is something that is also now open to the work of many women, and we will focus in particular in director, Ms. Huzamani, who entered the group of movie makers and of several intellectuals who were arrested in May 2022, and she has recently been released, and she couldn't be present when her movie was first screened at the Venice Film Festival because she has had to go back to prison. She is waiting for a sentence, and we would like to make a homage to her work, to this figure, to this important character, and this will help us reflect on the situation of women in her country and discuss the topics that also affect our country, because we are going through a very hard time in Italy when it comes to the rights of people, in particular of women, and our film festival works also towards that, towards having people reflect on social issues so that especially young people can have an international outlook and a view and an opinion of what's going on in their country. So again, films, the cinema is turned into a language, an international language. It is a type of training into the audiovisual language, the feminine language or female language, and also masculine language, because we see that our government right now has plans for the education of young people with a different distribution of the education years, education program, and this, after the pandemic, we see that our main goal is to bring people back to the movie theaters by promoting cinema, and this is why we have created a lot of activities with different universities so that students can come back to the cinemas, in particular so that they can become main protagonists when it comes to making or deciding which sections the film needs to have. For instance, the water section will be organized in agreement with the school, and this is why this project is turned into a pedagogical type of project. The young people will coordinate a round table around all these important topics, so young people are active protagonists. This is the future for us. We should not only work towards creating a new audience, but actually in order to open their minds. We have this area that is focused in training and education, and although I do not know what will happen with the new government, I hope that this important project is kept. The Ministry of Culture, the Ministry of Education, I hope that they continue this initiative that allows cultural communities such as ours, that promotes festivals, and also that they will allow us to have competitions that allow us to bring the cinema into the schools. Cinema is a type of language that is really very similar to many other subjects that we can find in the educational programs. And I really hope that the government will keep this initiative. We have just won a competition. We have had a lot of funding, and we want to promote a cooperation program to sustain this type of activities, educational activities. I will not go in depth into this topic, but obviously this festival will be very attractive to both actors and movie makers and people even from other areas. For instance, we have a specific section devoted to all sorts of professions that are around the movie making, and what we want to do is to promote women's cinema at an international level. We want to promote unknown talents. We want to promote different types of cinema that are ready to emerge.
Fuera de Europa, vamos a ir a China. On va aller à la Chine, un peu en dehors de l'Europe, pour que tu nous racontes un peu davantage sur Baturu Film Festival.
Hello everyone. Je pense que je vais présenter beaucoup. D'abord, Baturu Film Festival au nom China Women Film Festival. On est fondé en 2013 et à partir de 2018, on s'appelle Xiangfeng Wenhua Jie et c'est Baturu Film Festival. Donc cette année, c'est le 10e année.
Ella hace la presentación de Xiangfeng, pronuncio mal, y del Festival de Film de Mujeres.
She is introducing the festival that was previously known as the China Film Festival, that was founded in 2013. This year it would be in its 10th edition. However, Baturu has been turned into a cultural festival, feminist festival that covers cinema, literature, advertising, arts, and other domains.
Oui, on n'est pas seulement dans le cinéma, dans la littérature, la bande dessinée, l'art et autres domaines. Donc, on a essayé de créer un point de communication culturelle internationale. Donc, c'est un festival annuel qui dure toute l'année.
The goal of Baturu is to be a bridge of cooperation and communication between different feminisms and different culturalisms in China and abroad, and to promote gender diversity and feminism. This is why Baturu is not organized at a specific season every year, but it also has different international partners, multicultural partners, within the festival that takes place all over the year.
Les principales activités de Baturu cette année se déroulent du 25 novembre au 10 décembre. Mais en fait de situation de Covid, il y aura cette année des activités stabilisées qui se poursuivront jusqu'en mars 2013. 2023, sorry. Donc le thème de cette année, c'est le fruit et grains. Des collaborations de toute la Chine et monde entier sont des activités organisées, des événements locaux. S'intègre dans le programme Baturu de construire un réseau plus large à échelle mondiale pour l'avenir.
The main activities of Baturu this year will take place between the 25th of November until the 10th of December. However, given the situation of COVID this year in China, they will also have satellite activities that will be continued until March 2023. The topic this year is fruits and grains. There are contributors from China and around the world they are suggested to contribute with different activities around the world in order to create a wider network for the future.
Je vais présenter un peu court. En 2018, on a créé le WeFood China. Donc, on est très jeune. Oui, just une phrase.
In 2018, they created Women in Film and Television in China. That has above now 130 members, and Li is part of them.
Okay. À cause de Covid, donc actuellement, on n'est pas organisé que des activités culturelles à Pékin et à Shanghai. On bougeait dans d'autres villes. Donc sud de la Chine, Guangzhou, Shenzhen, Shenyang, comme ça.
Since the situation with COVID, they have not only organized activities in Beijing and Shanghai, but they have also moved to our cities, very important cities, but with less population than those two big cities.
Dans ces villes-là, on a beaucoup de pistes de population, de public, parce que là-bas, on n'a pas beaucoup d'activités culturelles.
These are cities that have a big population, but do not have a great cultural activity. This is why the role of Baturu is so important in these cities.
Et parce qu'en Chine, souvent, le Covid est continué jusqu'à aujourd'hui. C'est la raison que certaines villes pourra fermer ou tout de suite. Donc comme ça, notre activité culturelle pourra continuer à organiser.
Since some of the cities were completely closed down due to COVID, when they moved the activities of Baturu to other cities that were still open, this allowed them to continue their activities.
Et aussi, grâce Mouvement Matter International de l'aide support, on a aussi créé le XX Film Archive. Donc, comme ça, il y a plus de films internationaux, surtout en ligne, permettre les publics chinois continuer à voir plus de films dans la période de Covid. Et il y a beaucoup plus diversité de possibilités.
So, Baturu has created the XX Film Archive. This is the name of the 23rd pair of chromosomes that separates women from men, and it's actually a database of feminist movies. And although due to authorization issues, many feminist movies directed by foreign movie directors cannot actually be screened in China. These movies are invited, so to speak, to join this database so that you can actually have private screenings online for producers, movie makers, and feminist women in China.
Tu veux parler des activités de Baturu? Tu veux que je lise un peu les activités?
Oui, si tu veux.
Okay.
Oui.
Le pregunta aussi que
I asked her if she wanted me to read the activities of Baturu to summarize. For instance, in March every year, they organize in several cities a month devoted to women, Diversity Month. with the International Day for the Elimination of Homophobia. They cooperate with several other film festivals around the world, for instance, with our festival here in Madrid, as you know. They have also cooperated with an Austrian festival called Tricky Woman and Imagination Festival, and with the feminist cinema in Germany, with International Film Festival of Students in Norway. And also they have organized screenings devoted to different topics in cooperation with such festivals. They also organized a yearly festival of women film making in cooperation with the Instituto Cervantes in Beijing, with movies from Chile, Argentina, Cuba, Mexico, and other countries in Latin America. And also they make the closure of German Women Film Festival in China, organized with the German consulate in the city where it's organized.
Gracias. Esther,
Esther, you are not working for any festival right now, but you are an expert. You have worked for festivals like the Rotterdam Festival, you've been in production, you've worked for ticket selling agencies, you've worked in funds for the production of movies, both documentary and fiction movies. So how do you see the need that festivals have to change after the pandemic?
Okay, because we have, of course, these wonderful festivals that reach out on local but also international level in order to be able to present films that matter, whether it's about women, whether it's about gender, whether it's about politics. And I think these festivals are massively important in order to reach out to audiences. And that's where I come from, because that's my core business has always been international sales as well as local or national distribution. So I've been experiencing over basically it started already pre-pandemic, that we experienced already that art house cinema, and I would call art house cinema as opposed to mainstream cinema, which is maybe more the intellectual, which is the impact cinema, which is cinema that is a bit more cleverly made, communicating on a sometimes more fun, sometimes more inventive. Anyway, different than mainstream. And I've been experiencing over the last couple of years that as a distributor it was harder and harder and more difficult to get our audiences into the cinemas, and they become less and less adventurous. And that already happened pre-pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic worsened it because people reached out to platforms, which was logical. But as we all know, all the investigations that have been done on platforms is that platforms or digital watching actually doesn't make people adventurous. It leads you through the algorithms to the ones that
You elect already.
exactly.
Stay in your own bubble.
So you stay in your own bubble. That's why still festivals are massively important in order to get physical contact with people, to meet people that you didn't know yet, that can bring surprises, that makes you learn things basically. And then we have obviously the difference between the major festivals that everybody wants to go to, like Cannes or Venice or Toronto or Sundance or ITFA, as opposed to the local festivals. I don't mean local in a bad way at all. I think it's extremely important because you're much closer to your audiences. And I'm actually, my first question would be, how much do you know of your audiences? And if your festivals are traveling to Scandinavia, do you actually reach Asian audiences or Scandinavian audiences? Or I find that very intriguing question. Same for your festivals. Like, if Movies That Matter travels all the world, do they reach the communities that they're focusing on, or do they reach a bigger, you know, are we reaching a bigger audience? Because if you look at the traditional cinemas, it's well-educated, white, well-earning, older people like us, you know, more or less. But they don't manage to get the black audiences or the Asian audiences or the working class people. So it's extremely interesting to see if festivals can actually make a difference there. If we can start to make event-driven events that actually makes people enthusiasts in order to get a craving for more. Talking about craving. And I think there's still a lot of work to be done, because if Martin Scorsese publishes his, you know, fantastic, like, the best of all films list, I don't think there was any woman director in this list. None. Not even Jane Campion, who he highly evaluates.
That's amazing.
So, I mean, there's still so much work to be done, and
But do you mean work on women filmmakers?
absolutely.
Yeah.
On their position, on our position. And traditionally also, that's the other thing, the film industry is not known for being solidar. There's not a lot of solidarity in the industry. So to all the young people here, please make sure that you connect, that you share, and that you create the solidarity, because that's where we can start building from in order to get more diversity, to more inclusion, and to make sure that people are becoming more interested again in each other, as an audience becoming more adventurous, and films to be watched. And if that's not going to happen, then it's going to be tough. So, solidarity.
Hoy, por ejemplo, en la comida que tuvimos antes,
sorry.
Today, for example, at lunch, they told us that out of a list of 1,000 movies shown in Spain yearly, 800 of them come from the United States, 80 would be Spanish, and 120 would be from other countries. So diversity is not only about gender or race, but also there is a problem of diversity and representation in what we consume in terms of different voices and perspectives from different countries, Africa, Asia, Latin America, and even other European countries from Eastern Europe, where we don't see any movies no more. Margje.
What I've been seeing, I was this year at Cannes, and I'd like to go to A festivals as a human rights film festivals. Of course, I'm supposed not to be there, and try to steer up the dance floor a bit on this matter. And what you see in Cannes, there's a panel like this on diversity, and then they find one black person from the BFI, like, yeah, we don't know them. So it's also about reaching out, because our festival is obviously a lot of women filmmakers or men filmmakers from all over the world, and there's just been an amazing program called films founded by Don Atkins, who lives in Johannesburg, where more than 15 young African filmmakers made very, very strong documentaries. So it's also about finding and reaching out and being curious. I mean, we don't have this problem at Movies That Matter at all. None. Because there's strong South American filmmakers there's a film called Fly So Far from El Salvador, fantastic film, you should see it, of a young filmmaker, women talking about a women activist. It's just one which I grabbed, Writing with Fire, made by also remembered by a women filmmaker, an Indian filmmaker. So it's to me, when you hear that, that's also, do you reach out Do you dare to reach out? And how do you package it? We package it like, this is your ultimate your ultimate chance to see an amazing film from India, from El Salvador, from wherever. And it's really about how you put it. I mean, a lot is now also about marketing. It's about willing and marketing. And festivals is also, for me, a lot about, like, we bring the activists to The Hague. People love it to you see this woman fighting in a film for an hour and a half, and after that she's on the stage and you can talk to her. The audience really love that. And your quest about what should festivals be doing, that's anyway what we're trying to do, is you show the film. But with the film, it's not watching a film. It's meeting people. It's doing the Q&As. It's finding and also finding different way. Like if you want to reach a younger audience, we have. I mean, you should all look it up. Anyone who is more interested in new forms of making documentaries, it's called Shadow Game, and they did different forms. You have to also dare to make new formats to reach younger, more diverse audience. It's like a film on miners who walked from Syria to the Netherlands in 4 years, and they had to, you know, in East Europe do go over the borders. They call it the game, and then you have the whole situation of the pushbacks and so on. So they made the 1.5 hour. They made an hour. The guys themselves filmed as well, so they co-directed with them. They made shorts as well. And then what the filmmakers, the two women, thought, like, how can we make it more for a younger audience? So they asked a really good rapper of the Netherlands to make a rap on the film. The boys embraced it, and they're stars now. And we use it in our educational program, and it's incredible. Boys who would otherwise they've been in asylum, would never have. So it's never get that podium. And in the end of the day, they ended up with the film going to the European Parliament. And even in Sarajevo, they asked them to come. So they were in the plane saying, this hour, that took me 2 years, this would have been walking. So you can, but you have to find also ways how you communicate. I think, with all due respect, I don't know anything about the people who've been selecting these films, but it's also about making an effort yourself. It's like, I mean, when I was in Cannes, I got really upset. I thought it was extremely lazy. I mean, in Cannes, for the ones who want to know, I think I was there last year when what was the first time in 1777, not 17, a woman won the big Palme d'Or. First time ever. I spoke to, she was from Senegal, a filmmaker. There's been in the selection in Cannes, I don't dare to say how many, but very, very little films being selected by women filmmakers from the continent of Africa. And that's total, bullshit. Of course, there are really strong women filmmakers in Africa, but you just have to reach out and go there. If you don't go, I mean, and see the figures of, Deborah Zimmerman, Women Make Movies. She did a huge keynote at Movies That Matter 2 years ago. She knows all about the figures and facts of women, man, and so on. She said it's very good that we are here. Women selecting films, women selecting films, because you can see the swift down. It's also about, like, reach out to Judy Kabingi, who has an amazing film center in Kenya, DocuBox, and you find different filmmakers. So it's also about getting out of your own bubble. Anyway, said enough, sorry, but it's really close to my heart.
It's really important, because I was discussing earlier today, like, okay, we are now entering a situation in the world where it's becoming, at some places, quite scary. So therefore, it's good that some film festivals focus on situations elsewhere where it's difficult to get things done or to show films, basically. But it's also very equally important for us, even here or also in the audience, wherever you are, at whatever position you are, we have to speak up.
Yeah, you have to reach out.
And we have to reach out, we have to network, we have to get ourselves organized, and we have to make sure to really know at which position you're in. Even me working at funds, that's currently, it's one of my positions where I can actually discuss at least blind spots of racism, blind spots of sexism, whatever blind spots there are, but it makes you at that position where you can actually also discuss it with people. And it's something, it's one of the responsibilities that we now have in order to do that, basically. But it's something that we need more united forces in that sense, in a way, because you can also see that the women taking the core positions currently at festivals are also having a hard time. Look at Sundance, look at Rotterdam, I mean, look even at London. I mean, there's a constant change of
there's always a pressure, and you don't know where the pressure is coming from, but it's there.
Yeah.
Don't you
but in
feel
that sense, I mean, it's necessary to recognize that also, because you're also in a position where you're more easily criticized than the people who have always been around. Let's put it nicely.
But that's what you do. I've always been in this kind of position. But for instance, I had a huge, and then maybe you should reflect first.
No, creo que Patrizia quería agregar.
I think Patrizia wanted to say something.
Volevo dire che
I want to say that especially in Europe, but in my opinion this happens all around the world, women, it's hard for them to work in all industries, but specifically in the filmmaking industry, because we're in a culture that's driven by men. That's mostly a masculine culture, so this is a cultural problem. So working this way means also that we have to work to open more possibilities for women of getting to positions that might not be necessarily power positions, but that they have a possibility to work at the same level of men. So we should reach an gender equity that might be extended, if I can say it like this, that might include both men and women. In Venice, we have presented several research works by the Ministry of Culture, the Italian Ministry of Culture, and nowadays the figures are still concerning, because 97% of the movies made in Italy, and also with a European vision, the figures come from a European research, and 87% of these titles were made by men. This is the situation, and even for other situations. I insist, I say this every year. I take part in a panel with the active participation of the main characters and with titles of movies, feature movies and short films of women with different professions, and in this case the numbers are still concerning. There are very few women that work in the audiovisual industry. Even in terms of funds, if we take into account in the production and the funding, institutional funding or public funding, most of this funding go to men. So we should research about this. We are working together with the Equal Opportunities Observatory of the Ministry of Culture in Italy, and this has to do with some topics, like the topics presented by women. Maybe they are not considered by the committees that are made up by men as interesting, and also subject to funding. So we should think about this, and again I go back to what she said. So, recovering feminism in China. In Italy, unfortunately, we have forgotten feminism. Young women have forgotten what we had done, all women, all ladies, what we fought for, our goals. Our young girls, they don't know. It's like we have to re-educate them about their rights in order to change our culture, which is a male culture, which is the dominant culture. There is feminist observatory in Italy in order to overcome depression by means of cinema, and that's an international film festival with 80 or 90 movies that are presented every year with lots of audience, with a great participation, where we're still fighting on the same issues, the same topics. Why, after 30 years, nothing has changed? But because the figures are concerning. So a festival like this one, which is the 5th edition and aims to promote things like dialogue, which is necessary. So all European countries are welcome, but we should doing it everywhere, because this happens everywhere in all countries. In Afghanistan, women cannot go to school. In Iran, they are killing girls because they are not wearing the hijab, or they are not wearing it properly. In China, women are killed because there are too many women. So there are different cultural situations. So in my opinion, and this is my point of view, and I'm not that old, so I'm not a pioneer of the feminism, but I've experienced feminism. I've lived in feminism. But mostly in my country, where we are today going back to values, to traditional values, unfortunately, the women values are being forgotten, and filmmaking as a language that reaches everywhere should work in this direction. So let's welcome panels, meetings, working with the young. This is a kind of work that has to move forward in cultural terms beyond the question of filmmaking. This is a cultural work because filmmaking is a language for culture. Laura Vispuri.
Esattamente. If they go up to the levels of selections at bigger festivals. Yeah. But at the same time, they have been growing over the last couple of years. They have been building their audiences at some places already. So this is something that has started, that won't stop basically. And obviously the bigger festivals are going to help them, but it also needs the local distribution entities and festivals and cinemas in order to help them also to grow and to reach out. And I'm wondering myself, I mean, for Spain, I would have a hard time to find a bigger name, female. For China, I would have a hard time, except for Enhoy maybe, that there's some differences.
Isabel Coixet in Spain is most famous.
Prosciutta.
But that's how many more? I mean,
tenemos también una directora que ganó en Berlinale.
And we also have a female director that won the Berlinale this year, Carla Simon. So there are examples that are exceptions to the rule. And last week, the European Audiovisual Observatory said that the films directed by women are only at 25% of the entire European production. So the figures are very concerning. I want to take the advantage to see what's the reaction on the audience. Do you have any questions? for any of these women or about anything that has been said today? Okay, we have one.
Muchas gracias. So, historically, the first women's film festivals in New York and Chicago were 1974. There were a few more in France before. So this is 50 years we've been having this conversation. Okay. So how much progress have we made? Well, okay. What has changed? Let's jump to that. It would seem that the visibility of the issue coming forward, places like Paris and Los Angeles, we have pressures on the industry, but we can't forget that distribution has changed significantly after 16 and even video. And I'm wondering if we should leap to thinking of solutions, the dilemma post the pandemic, when Debbie Zimmerman's completely right and important. Women Make Movies has been significantly important as a traditional distributor, but she distributes a fraction of what's being made.
And the traditional distribution doesn't function
Traditional
anymore.
distribution. And when I hear Lee describe the feminist database of titles that cannot be shown in the People's Republic, but that are there to be seen, I'm wondering if we need to do a better job of pooling our resources at this juncture to have a place where we know on Vimeo that we can see, because those of us who are academics need to teach, and the libraries only do distribution. Now the streaming is a shift in the more traditional way. They have to know a maker or a distribution company in order to access. So we have to forget the local ways of finding. And the festivals are just the tip of the iceberg. So I'm wondering, what can the EU do? What can we do together to make sure that we can all access these titles? And the fascination I have with, I'm just looking at the new titles that you've got coming out, the movies that matter, bigger than us, being shown at Columbia, but it's the French who funded it. So it's the French consulate that got it to the attention of the Maison on the Columbia University campus.
What can I say?
It's a minor miracle. I saw it popped out, and I thought, amazing, but just because of the consulate. And
But that's how it works. But how you
Yeah.
think of Writing with Fire? Do you seriously think that Writing with Fire, a highly important film of women journalists in a rural area in India, it was totally, I was one of the commissioning editors for that film, so I know the structure of the financing. It was totally financed outside of India, and that's happening a lot. But I think the point you're addressing is also it's the distribution once the film is made. But I think what you're saying, and I think I was this year in Venice as well at that presentation, I was slightly in shock. I was slightly in shock, to be honest, when you saw the figures, like, no, this cannot be true. Because the Netherlands is not that good, but it's slightly better, let's put it that way. That it's also helping other women filmmakers to make the films, like a thing which is not addressed here. I was last year in Jelava, in the Czech Republic, and they had, and I was like, wow, that's an interesting panel. They had a panel for women filmmakers and having children. I always, when I teach, I always say, before I'm next to a filmmaker, I've got 3 children, and I always made films with kids. And that's something for women. If you don't, sounds like a very practical thing. But for a lot of women, the combination is like not to be done nearly, because their husbands are a man or whatever. So it's all these kind of things for women. It's pretty there's a lot of issues, and I was first like, a panel on women and children, gee, let's talk about human rights. And then I thought, maybe it is a good issue, because that's also something which has to be done. And the distribution, so it's one station further, and you know the States better than I do. A film like this one, On These Grounds, It's about institutional racism of the police. They're just not going to touch it. They're not going to touch it, and we know. So it needs funding from outside.
It needs funding from outside, but the underlying-
That's okay. I don't care about that because I've been funding as a commissioning editor so many films, South African films. The SABC would never ever fund a film like that because it was too critical to their government. So that a film is funded from outside, and then you make this cordon, I always say, politique, and put the pressure on the country. That's to me fine, but I think the point you're addressing is that a lot of women filmmakers don't even get the funding to make the films, if I understand you right. And that's, I think, that we need the women voice, the women lens, I think.
But it's interesting that you say this about the broadcasters, because the broadcasters have for a long time financed internationally.
Totally.
And with film funds, it's always been done locally or even regionally, as I understand today. And I think that the need, and it's already happening as we speak, with all the changing political situations everywhere, we've experienced that with the Hubert Bals Fund. The Hubert Bals Fund was one of the funds where everybody from all over the world could access.
Yeah.
But if you look at it backwards, a lot of male voices, very limited female voices.
Yeah,
but that's basically changing now, but there was a lot of diversity in that. But what is changing now is that a lot of, or some of the film funds are actually looking for international ways to cooperate together in order to find funding for films that can cross countries.
Yeah.
And I think there's a need for that. I think we need to drop all the barriers and go for this. I mean, we're a global world where people need to be able to access, whether it's and how to help the 50-50 issue. That's what we're here for. I mean.
Yeah.
Hay una pregunta en el público.
La scommessa può essere la coproduzione.
Well, an idea could be the international co-production. This could be an option for the future in order to distribute films made by directors from different countries so that we can take them to different countries. What was launched in Venice is one of the most important aspects, which is supporting and pushing on co-productions, international co-production, because it's easier to distribute them, and also to push also in terms of working with broadcasters and also on those who manage screening theaters, because they want to support non-commercial movies, and also author cinema has difficulties to get into the screening theaters.
Done that for 15 years, international co-production. That's, oh yeah, you have a question, sorry. So that's, and I think what the EBU is, the European Public Broadcaster, is doing now. The European Union broadcasters are setting up a fund. If you have 3 countries, you can do research, and with 5 you can do production. So that's happening, but that's another. That's not addressing the issue of women filmmakers, but it's helping filmmakers to make their films. Because I've done that.
Sono dei bandi a parte, quelli sul femminile.
These are separate funds from the Creative Europe funds. Has a specific mission. It has to do with promotion and gender differences, but also for co-productions. But you can bring them together. Why not? So these are topics that deal with the overcoming prejudices. They deal with overcoming gender barriers. These can be topics that can be developed in the context of a co-production spirit. We need to establish networks.
But I think there was a question.
Yes, we have 2 questions in the public. Hay dos pedidos de micro en la audiencia. ¿Tú primero?
Me gustaría preguntar.
I would like to ask the movie makers and producers here, how do you see the future for movie makers right now?
Well, that's a very general question.
Yeah.
The way to survive for filmmakers now is to have a very distinguished voice and to be very precise in which topics or which filmmaking or which imagery. The more precise, the more distinctive, that's where you can actually gonna make a difference. I think that's for international filmmakers.
Posso aggiungere? Le donne spesso
I would like to add that women very often are worried about not being able to push forward a job or a work that has been traditionally considered as a man's type of job. But there was a research in the schools of filming in Italy. We got these figures. Many women pass the requirements for the course of studying filming, and in the second year they choose production because it seems easier for them. So at a personal level, I would like to answer your question by saying that they need to have the courage again to push forward their own project. If they want to be movie makers, they need to test themselves. They do not need to concern about the fact that maybe they won't make it, maybe they will not be able to actually perform a movie making job. But movie making is teamwork. And I have heard this many times. Many movie makers have told me that at the set, it's very difficult that you find a woman with the necessary charisma and that can lead the whole of the team. When you find there are so many men in this working environment, so women need to be even more prepared in order to deliver a job that is considered as a man's job, because it's really not a man's job. So my answer to you is you need to be brave. You need to be brave enough to choose the work that you want to carry out.
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. In China, it's just after COVID, first time COVID, 2000. Ok, je parle français peut-être. Ok. Jusqu'à après le COVID 2020, il y a une réalisatrice chinoise qui fait un film commercial qui sort tout en Chine. Et ensuite, il y a le deuxième plus grosse entrée dans toute l'année. Donc c'est une réalisatrice. Ça c'est dans l'histoire cinéma chinois, je pense, c'est la première fois.
In China, after COVID, there was a movie maker, a woman movie maker, who made her movie, and she got to the second position at the box office. And this is the first time that this has ever happened in China's history. This is a very important data that shows that we can do it and that we just need to keep trying.
pour les femmes réalisatrices en Iran. Et même je suis rentrée au hôtel, il y a plusieurs filles iraniennes et avant moi m'ont remplacée. Voilà, donc je pense que ça donnait aussi un courage aux femmes, aux réalisatrices dans le monde. Je ne sais pas comment dire.
She talks about her personal experience when, with her first movie, Spring Sparrow. It talks about the migration of people from the rural areas to the city. She had this movie screened in Iran, and there were people in the audience who were crying. Even a journalist, a woman journalist, was waiting for her. And there was a group of Iranian people who felt their lives were reflected in the movie, and she is giving this as an example of how a movie can actually give courage to other women in order to act, in order to make their own movies. There's another question for Li Jingxiang. Maybe you have asked this before, have arrived late, and maybe she has talked about this, but I would like to know, learn a bit about the situation after the Chinese Cultural Revolution. You're supposed to be having a sort of equality at a working level between men and women. How would you say this is reflected nowadays in the filmmaking world, in the funding for movies? Do you have the same access, whether you're a man or a woman? Do women in the movie making business have the same opportunity as men in China at the moment?
Je pense qu'en Chine, les femmes réalisatrices, même les autres métiers, c'est DOP, comédienne, les chefs d'éco, il y a de plus en plus de possibilités d'avoir la chance de travailler dans le domaine du cinéma. Parce que jusqu'avant le Covid, je fais aussi un shooting, c'est pas long métrage, mais c'est short. Mais DOP et autres départements ont beaucoup plus de femmes dans le tournage.
Mais la question qu'elle posait, c'était par rapport au financement.
Okay.
C'est-à-dire, moi je vais traduire et après tu recommences.
Okay.
Si les gens avaient, les femmes avaient les mêmes possibilités de financement que les hommes.
Ah, ok.
Ella dice, la primera parte traduzco, dice que
I will translate the first part of her answer. You see that in many professions within the audiovisual sector, you see many more directors of photography who are women or art directors, and you can see this more often every time. And she will answer now your question regarding the funding.
Donc, par rapport au financement, est-ce que les femmes ont les mêmes possibilités de financement que les hommes en Chine?
C'est difficile à répondre, bien sûr. C'est un peu différent parce que on a commencé à avoir des réalisatrices chinoises en Chine, mais c'est quand même la minorité. C'est pas beaucoup, mais je pense que, par exemple, notre festival où il y a autre possibilité pour les femmes, les réalisatrices, avoir les fonds. Ouais.
Dice que es una pregunta.
It is a difficult question to answer. Actually, there is still a minority of women in the sector. The situation is, however, improving. Also, the festival, Baturu, also contributes to raising awareness and giving visibility of women movie makers in China.
Just in China.
Oh yeah.
But directors?
Hay otra pregunta aquí.
Sí. Sí.
There seems to be another question.
Going back to the beginning of the panel, you were saying that it's more and more difficult to get audiences out of the homes, out of Netflix. Here in Spain, during the pandemic, when we got films to theaters, we saw that we needed to accompany those films with a Q&A, and we saw that worked, that got people, that was the only reason why people would get out from their homes, because they would see the director or the producer having a Q&A, so there is a plus to going to the cinema. So do you think that the future of festivals needs to give something more than Q&A, like for example in your case, which I think is very interesting for the films that we do, like I do films on social issues, on human rights, so a Q&A is important, but also, as you said, in movies that matter, you bring lawyers and there is talks. Do you think that's the future of festivals, to do more activities around the films?
I think so. I mean, that's my take on the sort of films we program. That it's just when you show films on human rights, social issues, environmental issues, you just see the film. Very often at the end of the film, you're like, oh, so tough. But then when you see the protagonist of the film, the filmmaker, and an expert on the issue or something like that, and you can have a conversation and you can talk, and what can I do? Which very often people ask, what can I do? And like we're very firm in saying we are not Amnesty International and an activist group, because if I start to be that, I lose my journalistic independence as a festival, as a curator. But having said that a thing like Shadow Game, at the end of the Shadow Game, people were very devastated, but there was a petition you could sign, and with that petition, if they had 50,000 people signed, they went to the European Parliament. Yes, I do. We've done that, but we're intensifying that more and more to have really strong talks after the film, and not only how did you make the film, but extend it to make an in-depth talk, and people absolutely like it, which is not maybe the good, appreciate that, and that's very helpful. And that's why I started like 3 years ago, when I got appointed immediately with an industry program where we did it like IDFA, and I was this weekend in Documentary Campus Leipzig and so on, pitch their film plans, but pitch your impact plan, because think about, if you, I don't know, I myself, you know, what did I do? Research half a year on a film, being out there filming for 2 years, then edited for a year or two. So easily you're busy with one film for 4 years, no? Or something. I always made a few films together. Of course, I'm a very impatient mind. But otherwise I got crazy, but it's such a long time, and then you want to give it another push, and I think the audience is pretty ready for that. Because otherwise they stay. I mean, what we had the last edition was 2 weeks after all the rules were stopped, all the COVID rules, so to speak. So everybody could go back to the cinema, and we really thought, okay, now the young people are coming, and what did they do? Which I totally understand. They went out on the terraces, went out to cafes and whatever, and didn't go to the cinema. And I always said, yeah, because everybody bought a surround system, a good beamer. You rent a film with your friends. As if you're a student with one person, you make a party at home, you watch for €5 view, you watch with 10 people, you get some beers and you have a great time. And if you go with 10 people to the cinema, you have to buy 10 tickets, so it's really, really expensive for them. So you have to think about clever ways to get that dialogue going, and that's something what we really always have been doing, but we absolutely intensify. Yeah, for sure.
Sí, la última intervención.
The last question from the director of Film Festival, from Joan Gonzalez. Then we're going to change the stage. Joan? Well, following up on what Paula was saying, indeed, I think that festivals are changing. The online is here to stay, as did the record player, or as did Spotify back then, and the experience of the audience and the relationship between the audience and the screen is changing. I think we are at a transition stage, I still don't know where we're heading for, but definitely this is a transition. And in the past year, we have been using a strategy of a musical festival. That is to say, single screens, like single concerts, and then you can see the movie as you do with Spotify at home, because reality is telling us that the audience really value extraordinarily the tempo, the movie theater, but they tell me, Joanne, I watched 2 films in the cinema and I watched 4 films at home. And as festivals, we need to read the audience, and I think that we are in the process of doing that. I just wanted to share this with you. Well, thank you very much. Thank you to our speakers in the panel. Thank you. There's another talk at 7 o'clock.
C'est très court.
Ok. Juste on va dire, parce que je suis en train de participer le Iceland Writer, et il y a 10 réalisateurs qui viennent du monde entier.
Oui.
Et dedans, il y a 7 femmes. Donc, il y a plus de
Solamente quería...
Just, she wanted to add another personal experience. She just was in a residence of writing organized in Baleares, in Mallorca, and Ibiza, and Menorca. And out of the 10 projects that were presented there, 7 were led by women. So this is a very optimistic view. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Una foto de pie.